What's up guys, welcome back to my channel for another 1/12 scale custom action figure review. Today we're going to be taking a look at my custom Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Here he is out of the packaging along with all of his accessories, which includes an array of extra hands, an unmasked head sculpt, blasters, the Infinity Stone, and his Walkman. I don't usually do an accessories segment, but I'm going to talk about these accessories because some of them required quite a bit of work. Starting off with the blasters, these come from the SHF Volume 2 Star-Lord. As you can see, I've added a little bit of weathering. I also used a drill to hollow out the barrels, so the holes that you see in the barrels are not originally there. I've also added these magnets. That's so that these can attach to his holster. It doesn't work quite as well as I would like because the magnets aren't as strong as I would like them to be, and I had to use the smallest variety of these to get them to fit in the handles. However, it's a fun little feature that I'll show off later. The orb containing the Power Stone is just from the Marvel Legends. It's done in this really shiny silver, which still holds up today, even though that figure is very old. This unmasked Peter Quill head sculpt comes from the SH Figuarts, and I've darkened the hair just a little bit, but other than that, this is how it comes in that figure. I've also painted the little doohickey behind his ear that his helmet comes out of. Now for my favorite accessory, Star-Lord's Walkman. This is an amalgamation of a couple different sets. Some of the pieces come from Patrick Cho 1986 on Instagram. That would be the Walkman itself, the wire, and this component of the headphones. The base for the headphones came from Monkey Depot. The reason that I use these is because the ones that come from Patrick Cho are very brittle, so if you bend them at all, they'll likely break. And they're also oriented like this, so they don't clamp around his head. These ones have a nice give to them, and they're also designed to be tight around the ears. Then I added these foam pieces from earplugs. I used a hole puncher and then made a bunch of them and picked the two that came out the best. And then I just glued them in place. Now going over the detail on this, you can see that I've added with an X-Acto knife this little mesh work that you can see in the original prop. It doesn't look perfect in macro photography like this, but it looks really good in person. I also added all this silver paint. This was originally all black. And then this component I sanded off of the headphones that come from Patrick Cho, and then I just glued it onto these headphones and painted it to match. This wire, I just drilled a tiny little hole right here and then glued the wire in place. Now for the Walkman itself, as you can see, there's some tiny little word printing on there, Sony Walkman and the little arrow. So to achieve this color paint, I just mixed some flat blue, flat red, and silver. That's how I got this kind of metallic-y plastic blue. And then I just used some silver for all of the silver sections that you see here. I've also added a magnet to the back, and I just used a Dremel to drill a tiny little hole, and then the magnet just fits right in there. It's actually not even glued. When I was checking to see if the magnet fit, it happened to fit very well, and now it's not going anywhere. I also mixed this orange color and painted the tiny little button on top, and what I'm most proud of, as you can see here, I have painted the little tape that is in there, and the way that I achieved this tiny lettering that is supposed to resemble Awesome Mix Volume 1 is I painted that white, and then I used a brand new X-Acto knife to kind of carve out those letters. So let's see how close we can get and see what it actually looks like it says. Yeah, it's kind of gibberish. The Volume 1 came out pretty well, but the rest of it just kind of looks like a different language. Now let's talk about the figure himself. This guy is a kit bash of a couple different figures and includes pieces from various third-party sources, and it's an almost overwhelming amount of detail to talk about in this video, so what I'm going to do is organize it from head to toe. First, we're going to talk about his head. As with the unmasked head sculpt, this head came from the SH Figuarts Volume 2. I've also darkened the hair on this one, kind of to give it more of that Mandible Studio Hot Toys hair color. The hair color he had before was fine, but it really stands out when compared with my other custom head sculpts that tend to have a bit of a darker hair color. You may also notice that there is a difference to the eyes. That's because these are actually LEDs that I have fitted into these holes that I drilled in the mask. They just turn on like that. So what I'm going to do now is show you what's going on inside here, but to do that I have to take off the backpack as well as this head and take the head apart. So it's going to be a bit of a process, but hang in there. So there are wires running from the LEDs down the back through this little flap, connects right here to this little plug, and then there's a battery pack in the backpack. So I'm going to take this all apart and show you what's going on. Luckily for me, the SHF is designed so that this back part is a separate piece. So you can just take that off. Not as easily when you're first doing it, but now it's easy. And let's take a look at what's going on inside here. So I've drilled two 3mm holes into the eye sockets of the mask. And then there are these 3-volt LEDs that I picked up on eBay. And there's quite a bit of electronic stuff going on here. It looks a little messy because I'm not the best at this. I'm not a professional electrician or anything. I have zero experience except with this particular custom, but the principle is pretty simple. Once you have a battery connected to these wires, the positive lead connects with the positive leads of both of the LEDs, which are kind of wound around each other, and the same for the negative leads. And as long as they're not touching and you have a battery connected, the LEDs will light up. So here is what is inside backpack, and be grateful that I'm doing this for you, because if I had it my way I really wouldn't want to take this out, but I really want to show you guys how this works in case you want to do it yourself. So this is a 1225 coin cell, and I had Evan Designs kind of make this custom setup where the switch is directly connected to the battery holder, then the leads just come out this end, and it makes it really easy to just press on that button. Then this just plugs into there, and once you press the button, the eyes come on. So it's pretty simple. It didn't have to do any soldering, and it's just a matter of being precise with making sure the wires aren't touching. And these are very close to each other, so that's kind of difficult, but so far this has been working very well. Right now is a perfect opportunity to talk about the backpack, or Star-Lord's knapsack, or his purse, depending on which terminology you like to use. So the base for this came from AliExpress, and I heavily modified it. It looks nothing like this in the beginning, but I really liked the color of this particular fabric. And I got some 1/6 scale pleather belts from AliExpress and cut those up into all of these little sections that you see here. So this is all pleather that comes from a 1/6 scale belt from AliExpress. Very, very cheap. I've used this stuff for my Captain America custom, and there's probably a more efficient way to get pleather, but for some reason that's just my go-to method. Now this little hook came from a little necklace that I found on the road. So if you have any jewelry, or if your mom has any jewelry, or your wife has any jewelry that they're willing to let go of, this is where you would get that piece if you're not as lucky as me and don't just find everything you need on the side of the road. Then all of these pleather straps also come from that belt. The buckle comes from the Marvel Legends Volume 1. The reason that I wanted to use this buckle rather than a real buckle is that it not only looks more accurate to the one used in the film, but I don't have to worry about the paint scratching off like I did for my actual buckle that I painted gold. To make this as accurate as possible, I looked at tons of reference photos. I looked at the Hot Toys. I'm especially proud of this little section here. This was kind of complicated to make, but that's how it looks in the film, and that's how it looks on the Hot Toys. There's so much detail that goes into literally everything about Star-Lord's costume, and I tried my best to capture all of that detail. All of these little divots, and yeah, it's just detail that you might not even notice or think about, but it ends up making it look slightly otherworldly. Whereas if it were all just straight lines, that aesthetic would kind of be lost on a very subtle level. All of these little studs, which there are a ton, not only on his backpack, but also on his jacket as well. But these all came from Etsy. You can look up nail studs on Etsy. These are meant for putting on your fingernails, but they work perfectly as little tiny studs, little buttons, and I've used them in a variety of customs. These little D-rings, I think they came from the set that included the harness for my Captain America, which I modified quite a bit. Didn't end up using these particular gold D-rings, so I used them on my Star-Lord custom. I would have added another one here, but I didn't have another one, so I improvised. And it's going to be easier throughout the rest of the review during segments like articulation and showing all these details to put the unmasked head sculpt on, so I don't have to deal with all those wires and worry about them kind of getting broken. So let's talk about the neck. This is the Notaman neck, and I drilled into it and put the joint from the SHF neck in there so that I didn't have to modify the heads at all. They just pop right on. The skin tone matches very well, and the thickness is pretty perfect, but the heads are kind of small. You can kind of fudge it in photos, kind of tilt him forward to make his head look a little bit bigger than it actually is. But overall, I'm very happy with it. I would like to see one from Maniple Studio, kind of a mini Hot Toys look, but for now, I think this is the best Chris Pratt likeness in 1/12 scale. All right, let's go over the jacket. This is another very, very detail-heavy segment, so bear with me or skip forward to the next section if you don't want to talk about all these details. Long story short, I got this jacket from GPS Lot, and I modified it heavily, looking at reference images and looking at the Hot Toys, trying to recreate all of the little details that you see in the film and in the 1/6 scale figure. So starting off with the color, originally this is very maroon, kind of more purpley, very dark, but I just used some cheap red acrylic paint, watered it down, and just spread it all over. Did a few coats of that until I got a more cherry red color. It also brings out some of the detail and allows you to play with the tones in certain sections, so using acrylic paint for weathering and for adding kind of little dark sections of where it's been worn and kind of burn marks or something. So this is a real leather jacket, by the way. If you are able to get that jacket, you'll also notice that there is kind of a double lining that makes it very thick. So I just took an X-Acto knife, took out all those stitches, pulled out the extra lining, and then I had a bunch of extra leather to work with, which ended up being perfect. Allowed me to cut and glue on all of these little details, all of those, this section on the bicep, these little guys, this, there's a little bit of it behind this button, some of these details here, all of these little straps, and something I'm particularly proud of, this section of his lower arm. All of that was made with the extra leather that comes inside the jacket. So that's a big win-win because it not only makes the jacket look a little bit more proportional and lay a lot better, but it allowed me to add all those extra details. All of this was inspired, by the way, by Na Remerd on Instagram. I saw him kind of add some extra little details to his Star-Lord jacket, and I thought, ooh, that goes a long way. So I decided to do this as well. All the studs that you see are also from Etsy. They're the same exact ones that I have on the backpack, and there are so many of them. So I just found a little button in my review space, and now begins the game of trying to figure out where this came from, because there are so many buttons on this guy. Let's see if I can figure it out. There we go. This button fell off of there, so I'm just going to grab some glue and put that back in place. That is one of the challenges of this figure. There are so many little details and so many things that are glued in place that if something comes undone and you don't notice it, you could end up losing some of these little studs. I also had to kind of take in the coat, and I added some hand stitching in certain places and kind of take it in at the waist, which made it a little bit more form-fitting. So there are hand stitches right there. There are also some stitches on the inside right here to take it in there, and then I added this little section. These are all hand stitches here, here. And there was also a section of the coat that came down to here, as it does on this side, but I took that out because that's how it's supposed to be. And I'm very proud also of this little stitching that's supposed to look like bad stitching there, so I'm really happy with how that came out. So the Marvel Legends Volume 1 Star-Lord is not a great figure, but it was my best friend for this custom because it allowed me to get all of these parts that I wouldn't have access to otherwise. So to harvest the shoulder pauldron, I had to cut this off of the jacket, which was pretty simple. And I think I had to sand it down a little bit on the inside to make it a little thinner. And then this shoulder pad here is actually molded into the arm. So I had to use a Dremel to sand this out so that it could be used as an external piece of armor. Same thing for this. This is molded into the lower arm of the Marvel Legends Volume 1, but I sanded it down and then kind of cut little slots for this pleather, the same pleather I used on the backpack. And I also did a lot of repainting and weathering. So all of these kind of little pock marks that you see here, I did that with a needle. So I got some pliers, held the needle in the pliers and just poked it a bunch to get all of that surface detail, repainted it, added some washes, added some dry brushing, added silver to these parts and kind of on the edges here. These are little studs, silver studs, that I added there to kind of replicate these pieces because there's supposed to be one there. And what else? I did the same pockmark method with this. I also did that to the belt, but I'll talk about that later. So the hands are also from the Marvel Legends Volume 1. I repainted them and I modified them to work kind of more like an import figure. So originally they're just kind of on a little hinge, but I cut that out, sanded these little holes, and then drilled holes that would fit onto the Notaman pegs. So they just fit on there. They're a little bit finicky and they're kind of rubbery, so they don't like to stay on very well. But I'm very happy with how these look, especially when he's holding his blasters. These parts also came from the Marvel Legends, this one, and this one. And I just took them off of the coat with an X-Acto knife, kind of sanded them down a little bit, and glued them onto the coat. I also added a bit of that pleather, the same one that I used for the backpack, as these little straps to keep that in place. There's also a wire running down both of these sections of the coat. So there's a wire that runs all the way through here, up to there. And there are wires at the back in these slots as well. Taking off the jacket so we can get a closer look at what's going on underneath, you can see that this is just the Notaman body. I've cut off the sleeves of this shirt just so they wouldn't interfere with any of the articulation. I've also glued the bottom of the shirt in place so that it always stays tucked. So the pants come from eBay. If you look up 1/12 scale brown outfit, you'll see a lot of listings for this kind of Notaman outfit that comes with a jacket, a tank top, and these type of pants. And I got the tan version and dyed them with acrylic paint to look like this. Kind of went a little bit overboard because I had to change the color a lot of times, so they start to look a little bit shiny and a little bit stiff, but they still work okay. But I looked at a lot of reference images to get these colors, so hopefully you agree that they look pretty accurate to the movie. So the belt comes from the SH Figuarts, and I've added these little paper clips underneath it. And this is obviously molded originally to the pelvis of the SH Figuarts, so I had to use an X-Acto knife to cut it out. Then I sanded it down a bunch and then glued it around the waistband of these pants. There's also a magnet glued behind right there. You can just barely see it. And that's so that the Walkman can attach to his belt. These little details here are the same type of pleather that I've talked about before. I just painted it to match the pants and then added these little studs. These come from the Marvel Legends. They're molded onto the legs, so that was another instance of having to sand and cut and Dremel the Marvel Legends Volume 1 to get these pieces. And then I repainted them to be this silver color. There's a couple studs there that I've added. The boots are also from the SH Figuarts, and I had to hollow them out and then sand down the Notaman legs so that they could slot together. Then I just glued them in place. The jet boosters come from Collector's Crafts on eBay. You can also check him out on Instagram, though he doesn't have anything about these as far as I can see. But these are molded from the Marvel Legends Volume 1 jet boosters and then cast, and then I painted these to be as accurate as possible to the movie. So you can see I've added kind of a little LED there. And on the Hot Toys, they're green, but looking at other reference images, I saw that they were red, so I decided to go with red. And the way that these attach to the boots is pretty simple. So I've got this little Lego 3mm bar, and then I drilled a hole into the boots, and this is glued into the jet booster, so they just slot in like that, which also allows you to reposition them for better articulation if need be. Now, obviously, these aren't accurate to Volume 1. These are the Volume 2/Infinity War boots, but these are the best options, I think, because of their detail, the articulation on them, and the paint apps already being very well applied. And then I also mentioned that I used the same pockmark technique on the belt as I did for all of the armor bits. Just used a needle and poked it a bunch, and then I added a tiny little wash in there to bring out that detail, just because it looked a little bit too clean before. Another note that this belt is also not accurate to Volume 1, especially the belt buckle. The Marvel Legends actually has a better buckle than this, but again, this is just another instance of, even though it's not accurate, I think it's the best option just because of all the detail that it includes without needing to modify it very much. For articulation, this guy has quite a bit of range of motion, especially given the fact that he has a bulky jacket on. He gets way past 90 at the elbows, and it's most impressive on this arm because of all the armor, but he can do that on both sides, no problem, so you can get him into fighting poses or dancing poses. His head has some articulation at the base of the skull, a lot of really good head tilt, which I'm very happy with because that doesn't often happen in customs. He also has articulation at the base of the neck, so you get a lot of good motion here. And at the abs, he's got pretty good articulation, as much as I would probably ever use. Goes back as well. You also don't have to worry about the shirt coming untucked because it is glued down at the bottom. Then at the hips, his legs can move up all the way. And then at the knee, you also get a pretty good bend. One of the problems is that you can't use the hip and knee articulation at the same time because of the lack of fabric. So if you want to bend the knees all the way, you're going to run into the pants kind of being pulled down. And there is also the risk of little components popping off if you strain the fabric too much. As you can see there is a bit of strain right there. So I don't typically like to pose his legs up very much, but they do have that articulation. And then he has ankle articulation, just like the SHF Volume 2, and toe articulation. And then even though he has this bulky jacket, his arms can move up all the way because his shoulders are kind of situated down here. Because they're kind of low set, it doesn't really affect any of this armor. Same on the other side, you can get his shoulders to move up pretty much all the way. He can make a star pose. Star-Lord doesn't do a great job of holding anything but his guns in his gloved hands, but thankfully he does come with all of these extra hands, which allows you to have him holding the orb and a lot of other things. He also includes trigger hands, so if you wanted to go with the ungloved look full time, you could totally do that. And just to give you an idea of what he looks like with the headphones on, let's put these on. The nice thing about these foam muffs is that they don't damage the figure. So you just spread them apart, put the headphones on, and then you can put the Walkman where it goes with the magnet, and you got him listening to his tunes on his Walkman. So while I really like the helmeted look, helmeted, backpacked, all geared up, this look is also very fun. That's one really fun thing about this figure is that he has so many looks that you can go for. You can have him ungloved, unmasked with the Walkman. You can have him all geared up with the helmet, backpack, holding his guns. You can have him holding the orb. There are so many fun things that you can do with this guy with all the detail, articulation, and accessories. and I am super pleased with how this particular look came out. Then you can also store his guns on his holster because there is a little magnet there so it won't fall off. However, it's kind of in an awkward place, so it doesn't really make sense to keep them stored there. If you're going to have his jacket down, it's going to be really bulky. So, I mean, you could kind of do some photography with that, I suppose, if you had him holding back his jacket, ready to draw his gun or something. But yeah, kind of a neat little feature that I added, but it doesn't work as well as I would like it to. One other little detail I forgot to mention is that there is a little magnet right here behind this strap, so the Walkman can also attach to here. It's actually really hard for me to decide which look I like better. Obviously this is the classic Star-Lord with the helmet and all of his gear on and his guns, but the Peter Quill head sculpt with the headphones kind of jam into his music in a dance pose is also a really good option. So I might swap between the two in my display, but I think most of the time I'm going to have him displayed with all of his gear on like this. For size comparison, here he is next to the Comet Cave Mark 46 and my custom First Avenger Captain America. Star-Lord is standing at about 6¼ inches tall. And here he is next to my custom Iron Man Mark 1. These are two of my most detailed customs and two of the customs that I'm most proud of. And that will wrap up today's review of my custom 112 Star-Lord. If you think this is the perfect 112 Star-Lord, why don't you let me know down in the comments. Give this video a like, consider subscribing, and check me out on Instagram for more content just like this. Stay tuned to my Instagram page for updates on customs that I'm working on and pre-orders that are coming in. And check out my channel here on YouTube for more reviews like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.